Chapter 6. Flying Pigs and Chimney Inspection. Today we saw pigs fly, or rather we saw wild boar, and they were running very fast. John was up a ladder at the time, using a lopper, secateurs and a saw to turn our mulberry trees into amputees like our neighbours. We are at the stage of copying everything our neighbours are up to in their gardens, although we still haven't worked out exactly what one vegetable is. A giant leek with palm treetop type thingy that has been carefully encased in cardboard tubes. Presumably, it is part of the region's overwintering behaviour, which gives the impression that we live in a polar region, particularly if you judge by the collection of cut-to-size plastic covers sold in the local garden centres. Cut to the size of whole trees and picnic tables with 6 chairs, that is. On a golden November day, there is no sign of the Arctic winter, which we are told arrives at the end of December. If we stand still in our walled garden, falling acacia leaves tangle in our hair. As we walk out through the old stone archway into the orchard, we brush the seed pods, dangling like huge pea pods from the nearby leafless wisteria, and we scrunch through mulberry leaves piled high along the drive. Proper crunching walks through autumn leaves are new to me. They used to squelch in Wales. John is sawing away, muttering something about easier with effin' chainsaw, French chainsaw, and I am happily deaf, having observed French tree surgeons swinging from plane trees like manic monkeys, clinging perilously to a branch with one hand while chainsawing away at another, branch or hand being equal possibilities. I am content that only our tree will lose limbs while I gather branches and occasionally duck. In a lull, punctuated by bloody big chainsaw, I glance across the road and see a flying pig. My instinctive shout, "John!" makes him turn on his perch just in time to catch the flight of about 24 wild boar across the field into the woods. 2 minutes later, the inevitable crack of a shotgun suggests why pigs might run so fast. We now have a pretty good idea what it was that dug big holes in the garden and scuffled off when we caught it in the car headlights. At the time, we thought it might be a badger. It is a good day for wildlife. Our regulars have all appeared. The green woodpecker, which often drills the ground between the rows of espalier apples and pears, so oblivious of us that it carried on pecking the bark of our peach tree while we stood yards away and watched. Then there is the hare that waits until the last moment before starting from its form. Apart from the excitement of our dogs, the hare has an ongoing game of catch who can with a neighbour's Burmese cat, which thinks it owns the orchard. The cat sits, waits, and watches. The hare sits, waits, and watches. Then at some unseen signal, they are off. The hare has sprint start, sprint middle, sprint finish and, as if that isn't enough, dodges well enough to play rugby for France. The cat stops, pretends a total loss of interest, and washes itself disdainfully. It returns to sit underneath a shrub, where we have considerately hung a bird feeder. Although there is a tendency in France to look at something living and suggest which wine would complement it best, there is no shortage of food sold for our friends the animals, including wild birds. Our Marseillaise predecessor has left tiny troughs to collect water for the birds and a few little wooden structures which act as bird feeders. We carefully filled and hung our RSPB recommended feeders, plastic tubes with perches, and waited. And waited. There was no shortage of birds, but they took one look at our modern dining tables and complained about the lack of traditional French little wooden houses. Gradually, the bolder birds are risking the odd foreign architecture we have introduced, and there is now the full range of tits, finches, robins, and some with longer tails, garden birds like wagtails. They are not yet as trusting as those in Wales, which swooped in gangs before us as if auditioning for the remake of Snow White. On the September night that we arrived here for good, a barn owl swooped across the road, and I saw a chamois poised, a shadow on the verge. At 4 in the morning, It only took the patches of yellow autumn flowering crocuses and the familiar stars, the plough or saucepan as I have come to know it in Wales, and we couldn't have had a better welcome. Some people have 3 bedrooms, large sitting room, or even good school nearby, as the must-haves on their shopping list for the estate agent. I wouldn't consider anywhere without the freedom to walk into countryside, straight from the house, or without stars. I don't know how people live without a view of the stars, especially on a winter's night. But I read that 80% of England suffers from too much light pollution for stars to be visible. It is the reverse in Wales. I consider it normal, even desirable, to be woken at 3 in the morning because there is a particularly good view of Mars, which is closer now than for 10,000 years gone or to come. However, I know better than to share these priorities with estate agents. Those who helped us still think I wanted a house with 3 bedrooms and a large sitting room, but even they know that we really don't care any more about good schools. Not all the wildlife has been welcome. When we camped here for 2 weeks in the summer, I brought only essentials: bedding, cooking utensils, my Swiss Army knife and 2 mousetraps. Let's get something into the open straight away. Most houses get rodents at one time or another, but whereas parents in Middle England are now, through necessity, almost able to say the word head lice without flinching, no one owns up to having mice in their attic. I have to protect my friend's identity, so cannot name names, but I can tell you that a couple who sold their London house for over £500,000 regularly put down mousetraps in that same house. In case you think I am trying to deflate housing prices in the southeast by rumour-mongering, I also have friends in the north of England who couldn't sleep at night, more from the thought of their little lodgers than because of the delicate pitter-patter of unwanted tiny feet. Even if we're willing to share our planet with our fellow creatures, most of us are unhappy about sharing our house with them, and we certainly don't want anyone to know about it. You can't live with cats without meeting mice, and shrews, and even a baby rabbit. There have been interesting rodent moments, such as my first meeting with my 19-year-old belle-fille, where we were sitting on the edge of easy chairs making polite conversation while I watched a shrew scuttle across the living room like a clockwork toy, disappear under a bookcase and then scoot back again. Neither of us referred to the entertainment, although I suspect our eyes were tracking its progress like a tennis match throughout our non-conversation. One of my cats had presumably brought in its plaything and had been distracted. At that time, I had 7 cats, so you can imagine how pleased I was when I was woken nightly by thundering paws across the attic floor, and I don't mean delicate mice patters. Think rat. Think big rat. After giving a pep talk to the cats, pedigree Burmans, what can you expect? I bought a kind rat trap and was given the usual good advice, totally contradictory, as to what to use for bait. One old expert swore by Christmas cake. Fine, but this was May and I wasn't making a Christmas cake specially for the rat. Would any old homemade fruitcake do? Ambiguous response. A kind rat trap is a plastic box into which you tempt your rodent and it then shuts so that you can let the little sweetie pie out in the field. The major disadvantage is that you have to check it twice a day or you will kill the rat through suffocation or starvation. Much worse than a neat guillotine, and a crime for which I will one day have to atone with regard to a mouse. The other major disadvantage is, of course, that it doesn't work. The nightly rat parties were driving me crazy. Imagine the worst few weeks ever, with a baby crying every night. Then imagine that you're not just allowed to, but that it's actually your civic duty to murder the source of your sleepless nights, and you'll understand why I went out and bought a proper rat trap. I narrowly avoided another visit to A&E, just missing my fingers when I checked how it worked and laid the trap. This didn't work either, but I know exactly how big that rat was because I found him. Why, a rat's always him to me, or rather his corpse, lying beside a drain pipe. And the night parties stopped after that. I guess that one of the cats finally earned its keep, or more likely the rat had a heart attack at the sight of 7 cats, however fluffy. The rat was enough for me, and I was glad not to live in Canada, where everything is bigger and where my uncle had fun and games with a raccoon in his attic. Post-rat, there were some occasional run-ins with field mice which ran into the attic, into the kind mouse traps and out into the field, with strict instructions never to darken my doors again. It was therefore with resignation that I visited the cellars with Jean-Marie on our housewarming tour, and heard the exclamation, "Souris!" as a mouse flickered past, heading up. The crucial word is up. Above the cellars are all the living rooms of the house, including the kitchen. Alone in our new house the morning after, I quickly realised that these were not chocolate hundreds and thousands underneath the sink, but signs of a regular route to the rubbish bin. Down went the mousetraps with great success. The first morning I got up, checked the trap, told John, got one, took the trap to the orchard, gave the usual speech and released the mouse. The second morning, ditto. The third morning I was less enthusiastic. By the fourth morning it was sodding mouse, and by the fifth I'd reached, "John, will you do the mouse?" We carried out this routine 6 times before we'd got rid of all the mice, or the same one 6 times until he got bored or eaten by the Burmese, as John insisted. I had vague plans, encouraged by a daughter, to paint it with nail varnish or mark it in some way to settle the debate. But the day was sunny and life was too short, so we will never know. My sister Anne, on her parallel house hunt in the Pyrenees, was also considering the implications of unwanted wildlife. She and her husband talked about their plans to the couple whose holiday cottage they were renting, who took great interest, explaining to them that an area they fancied would be no good because of the mice. They spoke no English, and the word mice did not strike a chord with the Hemel contingent's rusty French, so it was time for a mime. The gîte owners gave a wonderful impression of fluttering wings. It clicked straight away. "Moths!" sister and husband agreed with satisfaction. Everybody was happy and smiling with the pleasure of communication, and Monsieur decided to extend his dramatic repertoire. He stood in the doorway and showed how big the mice were, repeating the waving and flapping. 6 feet! This was bad news, however you looked at it. I mean, who would want to live somewhere frequented by 6-foot moths? Alternatively, if it was not moths, what on earth was it? Frustrated again, Monsieur found a book with, wonderful, a picture of the mice. Yes, there it was, waving in the breeze, 6 feet high maize, or maïs. Monsieur explained that it was boring to see nothing but maize fields, and with 2 crops a year, one for the animals, that was all they would see if they went there. Sister and husband were suitably grateful to be warned about the maïs and went to bed, remembering to skate across the bedroom on dusters specially placed for that purpose to protect the new varnished floorboards. It wasn't until October that we suffered our next minor infestation. We had been surprised at the lack of flying insects in the summer, possibly helped by the exceptional dryness of the by now infamous canicule, heatwave. But as soon as temperatures outside dipped slightly, the flies zoomed inside in squadrons. These were not Welsh flies. These flies laid eggs in cat food as it came out of the packet and before it went into the cat. They buzzed in your hair and stamped their dirty feet on your chopping board. Sister Anne explained that I should clean my house with bleach. She seemed to think that what the septic tank didn't know wouldn't hurt it. I wonder where I've come across that line of thinking before. She has the family weakness of finding solutions for other people's problems and, after research, faxed me a list of ancient remedies for household pests. I printed them out, suspecting I'd need them all at some stage. By now, we had tried 2 varieties of sonic deterrent which plug into an electric socket. We only have 1 reliable electric socket in each room, so they didn't last long. 2 types of poisonous plastic flowers which adhere to windows, supposedly dangerous to small children, but I don't think there's a market for that, and they do bugger all to the actual flies. 3 different types of aerosol fly killer, satisfying to use with accompanying take that, but totally ineffective whether used in individual target practice or in overnight treatment of a closed room. Having diminished the air quality of the planet shamefully, we tried Anne's green solutions. We burned lavender oil. We wiped surfaces down with lavender. Even the dogs smelled of lavender. It worked as well as anything else. That is, it didn't. By the time we found some revolting old-fashioned sticky flypaper, we were down to 1 fly in each room, so we won't know if that works until next year, if we're lucky enough to have the same visitors back. Life is too short to worry about flies, when you can worry about the electrics, the walls, the windows, the plumbing and the heating. In addition to our wonderful modern central heating, we have a wood burner and an open fire. Is this another small sign of winter conditions, I asked myself? Keen for the comfort of real flames again, we lit the open fire, confident in an expertise gained in the coal valleys of South Wales. The Marseillaise had told us that it didn't draw properly, and they thought it needed a higher chimney. We were sceptical and wanted to see for ourselves. Once the fire was lit, we could hardly see at all. They were definitely right about the fire smoking back into the room. It was so bad the flies were dropping like flies. So at least there was one side benefit. Workman number 1011 is required. Enter chimney sweep. Booked 2 months ago, the chimney sweep finally arrives. At last, a proper Provencale workman, 2 hours late with a big smile and no hint of apology. He stays a further 2 hours, spending 10 minutes sweeping the wood burner chimney and 2 hours discussing the other one, and life. I now know why he was 2 hours late. I also know that he has 8 sisters, and that when he retires, he wants to sail the Atlantic, and so he wants to learn English. Don't get the wrong idea. Every word of the 2 hours takes place in French, except for a few numbers in English. Unable to keep up with the sociability. The ramoneur is wonderfully patient with my French, and when I tell him how much it helps me that everyone is so patient with me, he looks at me as if I'm very stupid. Of course everyone is patient with me. I say that I hope everyone in England is patient with him when he practices his English. I consider the likelihood. I picture someone trying out very bad English and the patient response he will get. The only place I can picture this is in a refugee centre. I am a cynic. I am betraying my countrymen. I hide the terrible secret that when I watched the French TV special on Celine Dion, I wet myself laughing as the beautiful French host referred to the song "My heart must go on." I do not deserve the patience of French speakers. Discussion with the ramoneur involves John and me in lying on our backs and looking up a chimney in torchlight, while listening to a stream of French that includes the words for stovepipe and flue. As I don't really know what a flue is in English, I ask some very stupid questions. Monsieur Sylvestre is as patient with my ignorance as he is with my French. He insists that there is no mystery about chimneys, and that if I do not understand, I must say, so he can explain it better to me. I have worked for 20 years in schools and I am humbled. I have no doubt that this is one of the best teachers I have ever met, and that if there were a degree in chimneys, my ramoneur would get me a first in it. When we don't understand a particular word, we are treated to a mime. Monsieur Sylvestre points to his trousers. He pretends to rip them and look sad. Then he mimes sewing them up again. This, he shakes his head and his finger, is what he will not do to our chimney because it is not safe and not legal. We get the idea. Cowboy repairs are not on the agenda. He will do a proper job or nothing. This is not the first time we have been told this, and although cynics might say that there is more money to be made in a bigger job, that is not the impression I get of our ouvriers' attitude to their work. There is far more work for them than they have time, so if they wanted to turn a fast buck, they could easily take on more jobs. Monsieur Sylvestre is not only a chimney sweep, he also fits pipes, inserts and does all the associated work. Although he debunks the mystery of chimneys, he leaves us in no doubt that he is a skilled craftsman, as he points to our 12-inch thick wall and says it would be easy to put a hole in that. giving the air needed to force the smoke up and out. He draws us diagrams to explain the pipe and the funnel. His eyes light up as he describes a modern insert design with air holes underneath the doors which blast the glass doors clean. When we look dubious and mutter, "Cost?" he remains cheerful, saying there is always a way, and he tells us of a retired engineer who adapted the design principle so he could do it himself. By now I am truly fired up, and I ask my usual question, how soon can you do it? I will never learn. Last time I asked, the builder and the joiner teased me with, "Tonight?" This time my ramoneur says, "Doucement, doucement, vous êtes en Provence." Slow down, you're in Provence. I am mortified, not by the gentle reminder, but because it is the sole sentence in the French vocabulary of my 5-year-old niece. On one holiday in France, Ellie heard doucement so often that she can reproduce the exact adult to impatient child tone. I have not seen myself in this light. To re-establish myself in the eyes of my ramoneur as a mature, capable grown-up, I offer him a drink, a petit café, a tea, a sirop. This is something I cannot get the hang of in France. Welsh workmen drink tea non-stop with ladles of sugar in it. Occasionally an oddball prefers coffee, but no Welsh workman has ever looked at me reproachfully, said, "When I finish the job," and then asked for water. This has happened several times now, so it seems to be as ingrained as shaking hands on arrival and departure. This apparently slight change of habit has a major consequence for someone whose French is dodgy. Your ouvrier settles down for a good chat, usually in your kitchen, while he sips his water, and you have nowhere to hide. "John," I squeak, but he has already vanished. "Monsieur Silvestre tells me that there are a few English around here now." I respond noncommittally. Perhaps I should tell them that his water's getting warm. "Did you hear the radio?" he continues. There are 70 English people moving into one small village in the Gers. They're all getting so much money for selling their houses in London that they are buying places in France." "No," I say, suitably shocked. I am pleased that my ramoneur realises that I am a person from Wales who has clearly not become rich, whether by selling a house or in any other way. We shake our heads at the strange ways of Londoners, Parisians, mad capitalists, all of them. I failed to mention that my sister has just become a Pyrenean, not the big white hairy kind who share my life, but the mad Londoner moving to France kind, possibly one of 70 moving into her village. Smug thought, compensating much for Welsh house prices. But this time the water torture is dripping to its last drops, and Monsieur Silvestre is reading aloud the magnetic words on the huge American fridge freezer, which we bought during the famous heatwave and which looks as if it landed in the kitchen after a failed attempt on Mars. Inspired by a metallic surface the size of a small shed, a daughter presented us with a complete set of magnetic French words to motivate us in our grammar practice. Instead, I had played around with some lines of vaguely erotic poetry. This seemed less entertaining when read aloud, slowly, lingeringly, by a chimney sweep prone to asking what the phrases meant. Even he tailed into silence before the last lines, as I stuttered that they were not meant literally, and that my French wasn't very good. The dregs were finally drained, and John reappeared to shake hands and accept a cheerful invitation to look at inserts with our ramoneur. He would ring us when he had found some suitably attractive fires to set into our small chimney breast. This was not our first offer of guided shopping. We have already visited a granite factory, taken there by our kitchen designer so we could judge for ourselves whether we wanted to spend more arms and legs than we possess on worktops that could double up as gravestones. The granite showroom displayed samples of the stone-like works of art, each hung separately to catch the light, and we discovered quickly that we didn't like blue granite. If you were told the price of blue granite, you wouldn't like it either. The blues and greys are the most expensive, with price further determined by the markings, those cosmic swirls like frozen fire. Pragmatically, we asked to see only the cheapest, and there was no hint of patronage in response. We were treated to the same enthusiastic discussion of the pros and cons of different blocks of stone, touring the yard to look at the raw hunks and to touch it. My sample of granite is a marvel to me. It is 14 millimetres thick, glints even on the raw sides, and the polished facet holds all the secrets of time and stonecraft shifting in its shine. How can anyone hold cut stone without feeling awe? How is it got? How is it cut? When I asked some of these questions, I was invited to come and watch the granite being cut. Monsieur Lac, the kitchen designer, would bring me. I'm not sure whether these offers are meant to be taken up, but I would love to see the cutting tool, heavy enough and yet precise enough, presumably with diamonds, that can turn the bedrock of our world into pretty furniture. I have always been fascinated by skilled craft, and I treasure all those moments when someone has shared a knowledge and a passion, regardless of how much money I might have available to spend, and it was never much. These treats have included the lyrical accounts of the rivers Towie and Cothie, along with some very practical advice given me by the man who sold me my first fishing rod, the engraving skills of Mr. Tripp at Tripp's Trophies, who created badges for me from school children's designs, an artist's construction of a rainforest from scraps and knitted strings, and the time I chose a diamond. There is in Llanelli an old family firm of jewellers with a good Jewish name, and when I was sent in there to buy myself a simple small diamond pendant for an anniversary present, I didn't expect to be treated like a princess. Lawrence is the diamond expert, so much so that he spends most of the week at Hatton Garden, but he happened to be there, and so was summoned by the magic word diamond. When I told him what I wanted, he thought he had just the diamond for me in London and would bring it back for me to see. A week later I was shown 2 diamonds and made my choice, directed to look at the cut, the colour, the light. I could not have been given more attention if I were replacing my crown jewels, and yet I was not made to feel stupid in my ignorance or let down by my choice. This is the gift of the true craftmaster, to communicate the knowledge and the passion, a true teacher. More and more, I realise how badly educated I have been, and every French person I meet is only too willing to remedy this. I have not been taught how to store my saucisson. I must hang it and only cut off what I need as I use it. My stall holder from Haute-Savoie asks if I am from round here. I am proud to declare. In that case, he tells me, you must wrap your mountain cheese in a damp tea towel and it will keep for months. He has already tempted me to his stall with titbits of saucisson and mountain cheese, which shouts of cows and calories and tastes of Heidi recovering all the bloom in her cheeks. I wonder what he would have told me to do with my cheese if I had said I didn't live here, but I daren't ask. He is already giving me more advice. Never, never, never put your saucisson or your cheese in the fridge. I feel guilty. I have treated my produce cruelly. I blame my mother. Why didn't she teach me this? And tell me important things like not to hold an orange pumpkin against a cream jumper when I was peeling it. She could have told me how to preserve kiwi fruit rather than my virginity. Far more useful. In late November, we catch up on rain, getting 5 months annual rainfall in 3 days. The 24-hour satellite weather channel brings non-stop photographs of cars swimming along swollen rivers and the pompiers at work, and if we look out the window, we can watch our own personal river flowing down the paved terrace. The pets are not impressed. They did not leave Wales for this. Villages 20 minutes' drive from here are cut off, their drinking water filthy with mud. The photographs of people queuing for bottled water from the Red Cross are no longer of Iraq, but of the Ardèche. We have a few drips into the attic, but I am proud of the house. It has survived red alert extreme weather conditions. As the floods subside and the rain turns to drizzle, we are restless, and what better treat than a food event? Montélimar offers us a salon de gastronomie, and we have the excuse that Christmas is coming, and so we can indulge. I am Welsh, Scottish, English. I need an excuse to buy expensive food. I am surrounded by over 40 hand-picked artisans, experts in a particular food or drink. I lose sight of John while I discuss fish soup with the wife of the fisherman. He fishes near Narbonne. She does the cooking and bottling. I don't like fish soup. I taste it. I love fish soup. I had no idea that fish soup should taste like this. It is the same at every stall. John finds me again, and he wants me to try the snail salmi, a sort of pâté. Snail salmi? Yes, with either parsley or roquefort flavouring. Not only do I follow suit and sample the salmi, we buy salmi and the snails themselves, stuffed with parsleyed garlic butter. There are tables set out everywhere, canteen style, so we can sit and taste at leisure, discuss properly the merits of the hams, olive oils, wines. It is normal. It is expected that you ask, what would you do with that? How would you cook it? What would you serve with it? Encouraged by this, we buy dried aubergine strips, lavender vinegar and truffle oil from one of the 4 top award holder vinegar producers, honoured even in the USA. We are shown the trophy and the news articles. On home ground, I taste local beer and bemused by the trendy white beers, the blonde and the blanche, which are all lagers to me. The brewer demurs at my request to taste his Christmas special, but then he says, "You are English. Only an English person would be willing to drink beer at that temperature, not chilled." He has run out of properly chilled Christmas special, and at last I am given something like beer at the correct temperature. Even the Christmas special is a light beer to me, and the brewer laughs at me, inviting me to visit his brewery where I can taste another beer, more like the Irish. My mouth waters at the thought of Guinness. I am assured we will be welcome. I will take my son around a small French brewery, and afterwards we will sit in the sun, drinking dreams in bottles. I inspect the bottled picadon in oil, reminded of the project, and realise I should have cut the cheeses into pieces, and that their retrieval from my jars is going to be an entertainment for all the family. And these ones do not look like old picadons. Far from being bottled shoe leather, these look like young tender morsels. A week to go before I unstopper my gastronomic delights, and I don't hold out much hope of them being edible. Perhaps next year I'll try orange liqueur. I turn my attention back to the potted meat specialist. We buy bottled cassoulet and tins of pâté in strings, regretfully decide against a whole ham, postpone our buying of nougat, Montélimar's finest. Enough. We haul our catch to the car. I chatter all the way, telling John that we can take the oil bottles into the shop and get them refilled, as if this will compensate for the extravagance he does not accuse me of. It is my Calvinist upbringing at work again. Not a Calvinist soul, though. If a soul can pig out, mine is going to.